Hey there. I'm in a bit of a complicated situation right now and could really use some advice. My husband, Ethan, who's 35 years old, and I'm 32 years old, have been together for 5 years and married for 2. We met at work, so I didn't know much about his past initially. After dating for a while, we discovered that we both had only one serious relationship after college. My ex and I were together for 4 years, 3 during college and 1 afterward. We broke up due to personal differences and lost touch, and it had been almost 5 years since the breakup when I met Ethan. Ethan, on the other hand, was still in touch with his ex when we started dating. They were actually pretty good friends. Let's call his ex Samantha. She was his high school sweetheart, and they were together from the age of 16 through college. They had been broken up for 5 years when he met me. Ethan explained that they parted ways because Samantha wanted to advance her career, which required moving to Australia, and he wasn't up for a long-distance relationship. They tried to make it work for a few months, but eventually agreed to go their separate ways. They stayed friends because they were part of the same social circle, which I was fine with until I met his group of friends for the first time. After almost 9 months of dating, we went to a dinner on New Year's Eve where Ethan introduced me to his friends, and Samantha was there too. This surprised me because I wasn't prepared to meet her. Ethan had always spoken highly of her, so I wasn't initially insecure or anything. But when I interacted with her, her vibe was very different from what I expected. Ethan had described her as warm and relaxed, but I found her to be quite the opposite. She made some cutting remarks about me in front of everyone, and they all laughed it off, saying that's just her sense of humour, but I didn't like it at all. For instance, she commented that I looked different in person compared to my pictures and joked that she wasn't sure I was Ethan's type since he usually preferred tall blondes, which I am not. Everyone laughed, thinking she was just joking. She also remarked about how I was her successor, so she felt she owed it to me to train me on how to keep Ethan happy. These were still harmless comments, and I was willing to look past them. Maybe she had a very weird sense of humour, like everyone said, but then, while we were drinking, she toasted to Ethan finally moving on, and how happy she was for him. I thought that was nice until she added that if she hadn't moved to Australia, I probably wouldn't be here with them. Nobody laughed at that, thankfully, because it was awkward. She quickly started laughing at her own comment, and everyone forced a chuckle to move past it. It wasn't lost on me that she was still possessive about Ethan. Once we got back home, I told him I didn't want her speaking to me again if he wanted to be with me. I wasn't comfortable with their friendship since she clearly wasn't over him and had been rude to me the entire time. I had put up with her once, but I wasn't going to do that again. I was very clear about my boundaries because, even in past relationships, I've had to deal with situations like this. Thankfully, Ethan understood where I was coming from. He found her behaviour strange and decided he would have to cut her out of his life to avoid issues in our relationship. So that was that. After the incident, I never heard him mention Samantha or speak to her again. He told me he had blocked her, and I was content with that. I met his friends several times after that, and they never brought up Samantha, probably because Ethan told them I didn't like her. Things had been going smoothly until last week. I'm actually pregnant, and last Sunday was my due date. It's Thursday today, and Ethan left to attend to Samantha because she had an emergency. She needed him by her side, so he left 2 days before my due date and came back last night. We had a massive argument about it. I assumed he had blocked Samantha everywhere and hadn't kept in touch with her. He told me he had done those things, but she used a different number to contact him and was desperate. Apparently, she had been diagnosed with stage 2 brain cancer and needed someone to be there for her. I was furious because there was no way I could accept him, leaving me alone when I was so heavily pregnant. I understood it was difficult for him to accept that someone he used to be close to might not make it, but it's not like she was going to pass away the very next day. He could go after he had been there for me through labour and watched his child being born. The day Ethan received the news, he left immediately. I tried to tell him it was ridiculous to leave me alone in my condition, but he insisted he'd be back before I went into labour. He said due dates aren't always accurate, so I might still have another week or so. He told me to just deal with it until he returned and left for the airport that very day without finishing our conversation. He knew I didn't have family nearby. My parents lived in Iowa and I was completely relying on him. After he left, I tried calling him several times, but his phone was off. I was really upset and desperate, so I called my mother-in-law, who has always been nice to me. As soon as I explained the situation to her through tears, she came right over and tried to call him too, but his phone was still off. She comforted me and stayed with me that day as I was really emotional, partly because of the pregnancy hormones. We couldn't reach Ethan until the next day. Even then, he didn't answer our calls and only sent a text saying he would be back soon, hopefully before the baby was born. He apologised for putting me through this and said he would accept whatever punishment I thought was necessary when he returned. He explained that he had to be there for Samantha because she had no family in Australia, and her parents couldn't fly out since her dad was also very sick. She was counting on him for support. That explanation did nothing for me. It only made me angrier. He thought it was more important to be there for an old friend than for his wife. A cancer diagnosis is serious, but it's not more of an emergency than being there for me during pregnancy. What could he do for Samantha that would instantly make her better? He should have stayed with me. My mother-in-law agreed, and when he sent me that message, she bluntly asked if I wanted to leave him. I didn't think much before saying yes. She spoke to her lawyer and had him draft divorce papers and an agreement to terminate Ethan's parental rights. She told me if Ethan returned before the due date, I could decide whether to file for divorce or talk to him first. But if he didn't make it back in time, the decision was clear. She had raised Ethan alone and understood the situation well, promising me I wouldn't go through what she did. She assured me Ethan would pay child support, unlike his father, who had abandoned them. She supported me throughout the week. Neither of us contacted Ethan, and on Monday, I went into labour. My mother-in-law tried calling him to let him know, but he didn't pick up. She decided not to text him because it felt pointless. My parents had flown in the day before, which was a relief, and they were all there for me. Even with their support, I felt Ethan's absence keenly. I made up my mind that I couldn't continue seeing him the same way, no matter what happened when he returned. So I filled out the paperwork for the divorce and told the lawyer to file it as soon as possible. I did this just 3 hours after giving birth, barely able to lift the pen. My mother-in-law told me that to be happy and a good mother, I needed to take care of myself first. I couldn't stay with a man who clearly prioritized his obligations to Samantha over me. After I gave birth to our daughter, I didn't even call him. My mother-in-law, my parents, and I were staying at home together. My parents are supposed to leave tomorrow, so it'll just be me and my mother-in-law. I told everyone about my decision to leave him because he hadn't even tried to get back in touch, despite promising he'd be back before the due date. He just spent a week with Samantha. Last night he came home late. When I opened the door, he hugged me, but I pushed him away and told him I wanted nothing to do with him. My mother-in-law heard the doorbell and came in with the papers, throwing them at her son. She told him to leave immediately, saying she didn't care where he spent the night, but that I needed peace and quiet after giving birth. She also informed him that I had already filled out the divorce paperwork and needed him to terminate his parental rights. Ethan was shocked and couldn't speak for a few minutes. I decided to leave the room because my mother-in-law was right. I needed time to recover. As I left, I heard them arguing, but I stayed out of it, focusing on my daughter. A few minutes later, Ethan started calling my name, demanding to see his daughter, claiming I owed him that much. That rubbed me the wrong way, so I put my daughter in her crib and confronted him. I told him I owed him nothing. He had chosen not to be there for me or our child, leaving me alone at such a crucial time. Ethan tried to apologize, saying he only left because Samantha had begged him, claiming she was on her deathbed. He spent the week comforting her because she had no family there. He insisted it was all platonic, but I told him it didn't matter. I asked him to leave and said we could discuss things later in the morning. He left with tears in his eyes, but tried to talk to me one last time, which I refused. The next morning, Ethan showed up again, pleading and crying. My mother-in-law took the baby out so she wouldn't hear the commotion. Ethan kept insisting that he only went to Samantha because she had no one else, and he wanted to be there for her. He argued that divorcing him and terminating his parental rights was too harsh, begging me to reconsider or he'd have to fight for custody. He acknowledged it was unlikely he'd get custody, especially since he wasn't even there for the birth, but he still wanted a chance to be a father. Eventually he left, asking me to think it over. Now, I'm not sure what to do. This is a huge decision that affects our lives, and I want to be sure before moving forward. Am I the arsehole for divorcing my husband and telling him to terminate his parental rights because he missed our child's birth to be with his ex, who claimed to be on her deathbed? Update 1. I've decided to go through with the divorce, but I'm still unsure about full custody. It's been 4 days since my last post, and Ethan has shown up at the house every day to apologize and beg for forgiveness. Each day it gets harder to turn him away, but I know I have to. Thankfully, my mother-in-law has been with me, helping take care of the baby. My parents had to fly back home 2 days after I gave birth, and she kindly moved in with me to offer long-term support. I've told her that even if I decide against giving Ethan full or partial custody, she will always have the right to see her granddaughter any time she wants. I've even asked her opinion on the custody situation, but she left the decision up to me, trusting that I'll make the right choice for both of us, just as I did with the divorce. I'm still struggling to decide, especially since Ethan keeps showing up, making me feel like forgiving him and taking him back. But I know I can't do that, especially after everything that's happened. Samantha has always been a sensitive issue for me, and Ethan didn't consider my feelings even when I was pregnant with his child. Honestly, I don't even know if Ethan and Samantha have been in touch, or if there was something more between them over the past few months. I just can't trust anything he says anymore. His apologies have been the same every time, claiming nothing happened and it was all platonic. He insists he was just there to take care of Samantha because she claimed to be on her deathbed, but every time I have to tell him it doesn't matter anymore because my mind is made up. I am going to leave him. It's sad, but that's how it is. Update 2. Hi, a few days ago I posted an update saying I had decided to go through with the divorce but still hadn't made up my mind about full custody. Now, I think I know what to do. For almost 5 days, Ethan showed up daily, apologizing and trying to get me to take him back. Then he suddenly stopped coming around. I found it strange, but also a relief, thinking I could finally think clearly without his presence. Unfortunately, that's not possible anymore. After Ethan stopped showing up, I started getting texts from other people, criticizing me for my decision. His friends, not just the usual group, but everyone who went to school or college with him, began bombarding me with messages. It felt like he had set up a template for them to send, almost like a petition against my actions. At first I blocked people left and right, but then they started making fake accounts to keep texting me. There are only so many people I can block. Besides dealing with all this emotional stress, I'm still recovering from childbirth and trying to be there for my newborn daughter. It's exhausting, and this harassment is the last thing I need. If Ethan really cared about me, he wouldn't put me through all this during such a delicate time. It's clear he only cares about himself, and I don't think I need to worry about my daughter's custody anymore. I'm going to file for full custody, and that's it. He still has the papers and can sign away his rights if he chooses not to contest it. I've spoken to my lawyer, and this is happening. The messages I've been receiving aren't nice, and I'm certain he's behind them. He must have written the template and told his friends to send it to me. It reflects his true feelings, and if this is what he thinks of me, there's no point in being together. The messages contained a line that really upset me. We never expected you to be the kind of person who would use their child as a pawn to punish their partner and play mind games. Is he serious? Does he really think I'm using our daughter to punish him? It shows he doesn't understand how marriages or parenting work. That comment hurt me deeply and solidified my decision. When I showed the messages to my mother-in-law, she was also angry and wanted to confront him, but I asked her not to. It wasn't worth it. He'd just deny any involvement, even though all his friends sent similar messages. I don't understand why he involved his friends. Their opinions don't matter to me. They're not my friends. I think he thought overwhelming me with messages would pressure me into changing my mind, but he doesn't know me at all if he believes that. I didn't even change my mind when he came every day begging for forgiveness, because I knew letting him back would be bad for both of us, and especially for our daughter. It was tough, but I stood firm because I don't easily bend under pressure. After being with me for so long, he should know what kind of person I am, but it's clear he doesn't. Every day it's becoming clearer that leaving him is the right choice. Even if everyone he knows starts texting me, I won't change my mind. This whole ordeal has only made me more certain that I'm doing the right thing. As long as the people I love support me, I don't need to worry about anything else. Update 3. The legal proceedings for the divorce and custody agreement are starting in a couple of days. Ethan has decided not to contest the divorce, but is asking for at least partial custody of our daughter. We'll see how that works out. I'm open to the idea, but don't want to implement shared custody until she's at least a couple of years old. I'm very happy with my decision now that it's all happening. It's hitting me how real this is, and I thought I'd be scared, but I've never felt more sure of anything. A message from Samantha yesterday also clarified some things. She said she didn't want to be a homewrecker, but needed someone by her side, and Ethan was the only person she could think of since her parents couldn't be there. She admitted she'd tried contacting him several times over the years, but he had always turned her down because he knew I wouldn't approve. However, she believed her oldest friend would always be there for her, especially when she was sick, which is why she reached out. She also mentioned they shared a moment and ended up kissing for a couple of minutes. Ethan apparently pulled away, saying he couldn't do this, especially while I was pregnant. Samantha presented this as evidence of his loyalty to me, but it only confirmed my suspicions. Knowing this, getting the divorce and custody on my terms should be straightforward. I've spoken to my lawyer and we've adjusted our petition to ask for more because I feel I deserve it, having been cheated on. I'm feeling very confident about what I'm doing and believe things will work out. I'll keep you updated on what's happening. Thank you